Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Monday. It's September 26th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and another brutal sell-off. We pretty much took back what we rallied on Friday afternoon. Um, Closed almost on that low. We didn't break that low. Well, actually, we did trade below that just momentarily, but not very long. You can see we're kind of bouncing off the low end of this trend channel. We could just chop on down till we make this new low here before we get a rally. We're so close. I'd be shocked that we don't get a new low before we rally. And a new low would mean going lower than 36.56.75. And today we got as low as 36.57.50. So we got real close. Real close. Let me look at that again. 36.56.75, and this low was 36. Yeah, we missed it by less than a point, really. So we're within a point of making a new low. So I mean, we could make that new low during the overnight and then rally. I mean, who knows? We'll see what happens. I don't think we're done to the day. Even if we rally out of here, which we should because we're way oversold, um, I don't think the bottom's in yet. Even if we make a new low here, I still think we're going lower. Um, I could be wrong. We'll see what the chart tells us. But personally, I think we got more room to the downside to go yet. Again, we might get another rally before that happens. But we're about to test those lows that a couple of weeks back seemed like it was we were just going to keep climbing higher. And you can see, looking back now, you can see how hard they were struggling to take it up and how easy the bottoms dropped right back out of it. So we got more than two legs down now, measured legs. Measured leg down off of this first leg would have given us a target right in here. We've gone much further than that. So, but that's what it looks like on the daily. Still pretty bearish. This was really not even an inside day. We closed much lower today than we did previously. So the market just continues to lose value and go down. So I just don't think we're done yet. I think we got a long way to go. But anyway, there it is for today. Let's flip over to the intraday chart. It really looks like a range day on the intraday chart, but that's because we rallied and spent most of the day going down. So let's flip over there and take a look. Okay, here's our intraday chart. You can see the blue area is pretty much the range that we had, the overnight highs and lows. We broke out this morning. Thought maybe we might rally, but it failed, turned down. I mean, it traded down strongly. Failed out the bottom side about the same distance. And then we rallied back into the range, went back to the middle of the range and quickly sold off again. More selling came back in, and we traded down into the close. We're rallying a little now. We're coming back. Looks like testing this breakout area again. Who knows if it'll hold or what it'll do, but it's hard to tell much by this overnight stuff, so I don't pay much attention to it. Got a little middle of the day, the trading was not very good up until about 9 o'clock. I mean, there's a lot of trades here to the upside, and then we kind of broke out here and failed and turned down, and there weren't a lot of opportunities to get in this, although there's a couple of good trades there that would have probably netted you some runners if depending on how you played them. So most of your trading was before 9 o'clock this morning. But let's zoom in. We'll go through the trades and we'll wrap it up. I mean, we clearly had, even though it was a range, we clearly had this spike and channel up. And so it looked like, hey, well, maybe we're going to have a range here. And then when we started higher again, even though this is playing out, we could have got a lot of times you'll get a different channel with a little different angle to it. Usually if this one's real steep, it'll be flatter. If this one's flatter, it might be steeper. But that didn't happen. We failed on the breakout. The selling comes in, and before you know it, this thing's rocketing lower. So, but anyway, early on, we had this channel to play here. I mean, it got confirmed right in here, and then that's where we had a few trades right up through there. But 7 o'clock came down in this area right here. In fact, it came right at this bar right here. And notice we had a triple test here, and this is also a first entry. Uh, this looks like two attempts to go higher. So maybe you look at that as a triple test and a failed second entry long. It's a little convoluted. Um, and you would think if this truly is going to be a range, we're probably going to try to go higher. But usually when you test something three times and it turns lower, it's going lower. So even if it's just going back to the other side of what looks like a range here. So maybe you take that trade. I'd probably skip it and wait for something. It's early. Maybe you wait for something better than that. But I marked it just because I figured somebody may ask about it. We do bounce and we finally start working higher here. This one was tempting to go short being that far away, but you can clearly see this green channel, and that's the first. I mean, it's hard to even argue if that's a convincing close outside. I may not have it quite drawn. It may be more like that right there, and that probably looks better. So I don't. Yeah, it's hard to argue that there's any close outside. So it's risky going short there. Wait till you get the break, and then it comes back, and then you get a triple test across there and a nice signal bar way away, and you can see this one would have worked, but this is obviously the better trade. And it just kind of drops on down. It actually comes back and tests the breakout area before it goes higher. Okay, I'm sorry. I meant to turn my ringer off and I forgot. But runs down, bounces, runs back up. And here, notice you get a first entry, second entry. So you get a failure right there. I like that one just to because notice how we went right back up here to these same highs and come back, and we're still bouncing right off the EMA. And you could really look at that as almost a triple test with a little failed break lower. There's a little support area right across there. We bounced a couple of times already. What is the deal? There you go. You can see it there. It's a little failed break lower with a, we came down three times. I like that one. Just to try to ride it back and test that high one more time. It's probably going to trap some shorts. It looks like it's going to be real bearish, and then suddenly it reverses right off the EMA. You don't know that it's going to take off like that. You're just trying to get a scalp out of it. And if you get more, that's even better. Sometimes you get your best moves on something you're probably thinking, hey, I'll probably only get a scalp out of that. But you can see we had some support right across there the whole time. We bounced there a few times before we went lower. We bounced here. And so a lot of people were probably looking for the same move back down and got fooled right there. And I just like it because it looks like a trap. You can see it tried to go lower three times, and it looks like it is a failed second entry short as well. So some people got fooled and trapped there. And of course it runs on up pretty strongly. I don't see anything else there. There is a second entry here, but I mean, this is starting to get a little, it's right off the EMA, and there probably is a shorter term trend line on here, like so. So it would be the first breakout side of that trend line. Let me go ahead and color it so it's a little easier to see. But I just felt like we'd moved a good bit, and that looks a little congested. And again, you could argue it's a triple test. It looks a little like this. So if you took that, looking at it after the fact, time to look at it a little closer. Maybe you take that. Actually, I wouldn't take that entry. I would take the higher low right there because that's where the second entry is too. So the problem is you could get a little bit of a trend line there, but there's no break in new low yet. So you got that issue going on. But we're in an uptrend, and there is a triple test, and it does look like a repeat of this right here. Notice 1, 2, 3, and this one goes a little lower on the double bottom. Perfect rematch there, repeat pattern, and the entry's a little different. Of course, it's on a higher low here, so maybe you take that trade. And of course, it makes a new high, it turns down, you get a close out here at a new low, and it bounces right where you expect the trend line to be on a second entry, way away from the EMA. I like that trade. It doesn't take off, and it comes back and it breaks lower again and turns back up. So if you didn't get in, I don't know if I would add on here, but if you didn't get in here, I would get in here, and you might even add on because that just further confirms that trend line on a higher low. It breaks lower and turns up. It's an engulfing bar. I don't think I would trade it on the engulfing bar, but when it closes this bullish, if you get a break up above it. If you've got enough room back to the EMA, you could take that trade or add on. There's just enough room there. I don't know that I would add on. I'd probably, if I wasn't in, I'd probably jump in there though. We kind of chop along, and it just kind of chops higher, and then it's 2 legs back again to the trend line once again, and that's another second entry. That signal bar is a little iffy. I went back and forth about this one, but that trend line's been holding strongly, and that's clearly two legs back, and there's a good bit of room back to the EMA. We're kind of overshot to the downside, so you might argue that one's green. I liked it. I marked it blue because I liked it in real time, but maybe it's closer to being green. I think it's right on the borderline. And then of course we make another new high and then run back. And notice this one is right where the previous highs were. Notice we close a little higher. So when this comes back, we get a break here. And you can see we're losing a little momentum because we were running straight up to the other side, coming back. And then look, notice we come back. Here we don't quite get back. We just barely get above the midline, come back, and then same thing here. We come back and we get a break here. So, but notice you get a second entry here, but that's an inside bar. But then you get the higher low here, and it breaks lower and turns up again. I don't think I trade that on an engulfing bar. Let me zoom in here a little bit. But when that closes that bullish, as long as you got enough room to get out before these highs, I like taking that trade. And then again, you get resistance right at that overnight high there, and it turns back down. And so now you got a break. You don't quite have a new high, but when this thing tries to go higher once and then twice, I like going short there just to try to get a scalp out of it. Looks like we're going to go sideways here. It ends up dropping on down. It's another one of those that you're looking maybe to get a scalp. You can see we try to go higher 3 times, but the big thing is it's a first entry, second entry that fails. And it looks like there's a little congestion area here, and there is enough room to scalp out. So I like taking that trade. It's a little risky. It's a little bit early. It looks like it's going to be actually the reason I like it. It looks like it's going to be a range day at this point. So you're kind of taking a shot at catching the top of the range. You get a nice move, but you don't really get what I was thinking you would get. And plus, you're still looking for. Notice this channel. This is a 2-tiered channel with a little bit of movement on it on a break. So you expect prices to maybe make a new low there, and of course they do, and then you get a higher low way away from the EMA, so good chance we're going higher again. You don't know this is going to do this, you just figure prices are going to test this high. It looks like we're maybe going to set up in a range here, a sideways range that's much higher, but it ends up rocketing on up. This turns out to be a really good trade. It's a second entry long too. Notice that's a new high. First entry, pull back. Second entry when it breaks higher. And again, you're just looking for a scalp, and this is one of those that, or maybe to ride it back to test the highs, and this is one that just takes off. So, and that's your retest. And then you just start chopping sideways up here. I don't see anything in there I think is worth risking. There is this failed break lower here, but we've already got a new high on a really strong move. If you took that, it works. It's right off the original trend line. It's a failed break lower. It's a nice signal bar. There's some reasons to, if you took that one, and you can see it clearly works. It's only good for a scalp or so, but and then we drop down lower, and then we get a second entry short. Well, look at that, how bearish that bar is. As long as you got room to get out here, I like that trade. Again, it's a little risky. I would have preferred to see this find resistance when it came back here once, and if it came back again and gave you a second entry and it found resistance off this low, it still really finds resistance, but it's a little bit higher here where it finds it. And so this could break lower and turn back up again. That's the problem there. So that's the reason I marked that one green. And then this is where we start this. We drop down and just kind of go sideways, and then we drop out of there and we rally, and you're not getting any entries here. Um, I think it's clear that we got this trend line here, but you can't take a first entry on a bullish bar that just came out of congestion that's right back in the middle of it again, even though it is off the key entry point. And then we drop on down, and now you got a little bit of a channel working up, and it looks like you get a close outside here. It's not real convincing. That's why I didn't mark this short here, but when it drops on down again and closes outside again and tries to, and makes two legs up to a new high, and then gives you that big bearish bar and still closes inside that trend line, that's where you want to go short and look at it go. And if you'd have taken this other one, it would have worked, but I just think it's too risky. And now you've tested the resistance again, and it held. Actually, you could argue that you got a triple test there too with the failed break higher. And look at the move that leads to. If you take this, you probably get a runner easily, and you might get a big runner here. We drop all the way down to the lower. You don't know that that's the lower side, but you start drawing your trend channel down here. I think in the end we went a little further. I think we really got a little bit of an overshoot in the end. And notice not long after that little bit of an overshoot, we get the break when it gets back to the other side. So this market was just really weak here, and it couldn't even really rally. It just went sideways back to the other side. But we're still chopping lower here. I just don't see anything I really like over here. Maybe this entry right here, you could look at that as a second entry, but look how congested that is. It's above the EMA, it's above the midline. We just came off the lows. You probably should actually draw your somewhat of a trend, and that's the first close. I just don't think you can take that. Yeah, you could argue there's a failed second entry long here, but again, it looks a little sideways. It looks like we just worked back into that range. And so maybe you treat that as a failed breakout, but it's finding support right there, and it finally goes lower, but it's just really, I think it's too risky. Same thing, it drops down here and we're just chopping sideways. I don't see anything that really coming off these lows. We should be going back to the other side. It looks like we're going to here, and it drops. You get a failed break out the top, failed break out the bottom, then you're kind of back in there. And really what happens down here later on is this just kind of moves a little lower. And you're still just chopping around here. I don't think you want to go long yet, and I don't see any short until finally you get this second entry short here. Notice this is basically a double bottom, one leg up, first entry, second leg up. Relatively small bar, 9 ticks, way away from the EMA. You do get your close outside and new high. A lot of times it's better to wait for a lower high, but we haven't been getting them lately. And you know, if this thing's played out, I think on the second entry, I think it's worth the risk. That turns out to be a good trade. It just runs right back down and gets back in this channel or range again. Don't take any of this. There's nothing there that's worth risking. Maybe this failed breakout, but really by that time this had tightened back up again, and there's not much room there. And you can see it looked like it was going to bounce before it went lower, and that's the concern, that it bounces there. So I just don't see anything there worth taking. And then of course the bottom just falls out of it again. There's a lower high here, but you can't take that. We just keep dropping. And nothing in here. Too congested, too sideways. And then it starts rallying again. It runs up here and then the bottom just falls out again. But once again, it looks like you get a close outside, not real convincing, but even then you don't get a setup to get into it. There's no signal bar there you can take or anything, and the bottom just falls out of it again. This thing was pretty weak. They were just basically selling every rally. As soon as it was obvious the rally was over, they're selling it again. So, I mean, we've talked about that before. If you get a good signal bar off trend lines that are real strong trends like this, you could take them, and you notice they pretty much all work. But you need to be really advanced and know what you're doing to do that. So I'm not really going. I start talking about that, and then I start getting 100 emails. People just aren't ready for that, and it gets confusing for them. And then they try to do it, and it fails, and they start sending me emails why it failed, and they're just not reading it right. So once you start to see this, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But you can see this is a strong trend, even though it doesn't look like it. When you see your little corrections, they're very shallow. They're usually like dojis and things. And same thing on the way up. That's the way they look on the way up, kind of strong until it just ends and turns down. But really, this is a downtrend, so you're looking for these to the downside, not the upside. But anytime you get a really strong candle that's bearish, like that one right there, let's see, here's one that failed, but notice how congested it is there too. The rest of these, notice they're not real congested. They're just actually, you're not really getting a lot of good signal bars here. You got that one, and you see how well it works. And you could probably argue that one too, but now it looks a little congested again. Let's see if there's any over here on this one coming down. Yeah, you got a pretty good signal bar right there. And you get a close outside and a new low on that one, but there's not any others in there. But you'll learn to spot those over time when you get more experience. But this drops on down, second entry short, nice signal bar, plenty of room down to this support. So no worries with that. It continues to go lower and then it bounces and we're just chopping along again. Now we do have a break and two legs down to a new low now. So this thing could reverse out of here if you got the right setup. Notice here you got a second entry short that fails. It works if you took it, but I wouldn't take that trade, not on that, because this is really, technically when it broke above that bar is when it failed, but because that's an inside bar to a doji and another bar, I'm not going to take that trade. It works, but I think it's risky. But if you just wait a few minutes, it's not long till you get a double bottom down here, and you could count that as a second entry. We're not looking for second entries in this sideways stuff, but if you see an entry and it's also a second entry, then it probably adds a little bit to it. And this actually breaks lower and turns up. I wouldn't trade that on the engulfing, but I do like it if it breaks above that. But again, there's something to be concerned about. Notice the last time we came up, it turned down at the midline. You want to see it going back and forth. If you only have room to this side, you want to know it's been going back and forth. And notice the last time up, it only got to the midline and turned down. So it could turn down again right there yet again. So you got it. So for that reason, that one's green. But that is a double bottom, and we've tried to go like, really you could argue there's a triple bottom there, and that's a triple test. So that's the other reason I kind of like that one. Notice you try to go lower once, twice, three times. Very bullish bar. The problem is it's so big that it's right into that midline, and that can be iffy. And then, of course, we fell out the top. You get a lower high. If you got enough room there, take that trade. It doesn't end up mattering, but you still got to be careful with it. And we drop down here again and then rally back out of there. No chance to really buy this. Chopping sideways. I don't see anything there. Maybe you take this trade. It's a second. Notice that we drop on down. You got a clear channel working down. You get a close outside. Notice that new low. First entry, second entry. Look how bearish that is. You'll retest this low most likely. There's plenty of room to get a scalp there, even if it doesn't make a new low. And notice it runs down, makes a new low, goes higher, comes back, makes a higher low, and then takes off. And unfortunately, you don't get a reversal here. It just takes off. You do get a reversal way up here. Failed second entry, but that's moved too far. This just looks like one leg up. And we just run up and go right back in another one of these. And you know, there's probably, you might argue for a green one in there somewhere, but you really want to see a good setup off the lows or a good setup off the highs to go short. And I see a triple test here with a reasonable signal bar with plenty of room back to the midline. High or low here on a failed breakout with plenty of room back to the midline. So I like those two. Other than that, I think the rest of them, another failed break lower here, but it looks a little convoluted there. You'd probably want a higher low and you don't get one. and then we're just chopping into the 2:30 time there, and I don't see anything else I like. So I just saw that after about 1:30, if you waited, you might have seen these two trades here on that one nice move, and that was pretty much it. So most of your trading was earlier, and then it was a little spread out after that. So you got to be patient on these days, especially you need to wait for the right setups, and sometimes you don't get them, and that makes it hard for people. They get antsy and they feel like they got to take a trade, and they go back and forth over some of these trades that aren't a really good setup, but then they take off and they say, I knew I should have taken that trade, if it wasn't a good setup, and it just because it took off doesn't mean you should have taken it, because that's what gets you. And the next time you see that same kind of deal, you'll say, last time I talked myself out of that trade, I'm taking it today. And then today you take it, and exactly what you expected to happen the time before is what happens to you the next 2 or 3 times you try to take it. So just because something takes off and makes a good move does not mean it was a good setup. Doesn't mean it was a high probability setup. It just means that, hey, the market took off. But there was no reason for you to know that it was probably going to take off other than maybe a gut feel or something, and you got to be careful with those. I'm not saying don't trust your gut feels, but you still better have the setup and everything better. The context better be there, and the setup, and the signal bar, the whole 9 yards needs to be there. And if it's not, just sit tight and be patient until you do get one of those trades. I mean, there's plenty of trades here today to make plenty of money. But if you didn't get started early, you probably had to be patient and wait. And that's hard for some people, and that's what gets most people. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you had a good trading day. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. We're starting a new week. But I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next.